Greg McElroy just called out the Ohio State Buckeyes, criticizing them for a big decision made ahead of our first college football playoff game. We got to break it all down. What's up, guys? I'm Matt Long. Welcome to Columbus Football 365. If you're an Ohio State Buckeye fan, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out a ton. But let's jump right into the video for today. Coming from on ESPN, Greg McElroy said, when asked about Ohio State's play calling change, he said, can Brian Hartline really not handle dual responsibilities, being the head coach at USF and calling plays? I've seen people do it for a decade and change, and he can't manage it? Greg McElroy then continued to say, don't get me wrong, the 10-point Big Ten championship game was disappointing, especially the red zone play calling, the use of heavy personnel, taking your best players in Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate off the field. Ryan Day, now, does he not trust Brian Hartline anymore? I expect a very aggressive approach from Ohio State in this matchup. Saying this ahead of the U-Miami game. So quick, the background that you need, if you didn't know, Brian Hartline, the Ohio State no longer current, but as of yesterday, play caller and still current offensive coordinator, has taken the head coaching job at USF, the University of South Florida, meaning head coach Ryan Day will be retaking over the play calling responsibilities for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ryan Day, after taking over from Urban Meyer as head coach in 2018, called the plays for the Ohio State Buckeyes for 5 seasons, 2019 to 2023. 2024, play calling responsibilities were handed off to Chip Kelly, and then this season they were given to Brian Hartline. Now, Greg McElroy is criticizing Brian Hartline for not being able to handle both of these responsibilities at once. Now, we talk about it. We know Brian Hartline has a very large football brain and knows what he's doing in terms of football, schematics, and he's had a lot of things on his plate during his time at Ohio State. Currently the wide receivers coach and the offensive coordinator at the same time, also the play caller, now adding another thing to his plate. And we talk about how when you have something as important as being the head coach of another program being heaped onto your plate as well, it is impossible to do everything that you used to be doing at the same level. It's impossible to give it the same attention and put in as much work as he used to be doing with the other things. We understand that. We know that he now has a new responsibility. The question is, does he really need to be called out like this? Greg McElroy does put together some pretty good points, talking about some things that some smart commenters have noticed, the way that Hartline has been switching over to heavier personnel when we get down in the red zone, and our lack of ability to turn red zone drives into touchdowns at a high enough level has been something that has been called out at the podium by head coach Ryan Day, and it's something that has needed to be improved over the entire course of the season, and it bit us in the Big Ten championship game. One of the reasons why we were not able to score more than 10 points against Indiana. Yes, Indiana has the second best defense in all of college football in terms of yards allowed per game behind the Ohio State Buckeyes, but still 10 points in that game is not enough. We went down into the red zone twice and were twice turned away. One was the 4th and 1 non-conversion when we called a QB sneak for quarterback Julian Sayin, and the second thing was the missed field goal at the end of the game. Those drives need to be turned into, really they should be touchdowns when we have the talent on offense that we have. And the number one thing that needs to happen is we need to put the talent on the field. Even if we're going to a one wide receiver set, we can't be taking off both Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. Jeremiah Smith takes up so much of the defense's attention and so much of their scheme whenever him just by being on the field. He's someone who really should not be leaving the field. Some of the other, the right things that he said, that Greg McElroy said, was he talked about how, does Ryan Day not trust Brian Hartline anymore because he only put up 10 points? It's possible. It's definitely possible. I don't think he's right when he says this, because every offensive coordinator is able to have one game where he doesn't put up a ton of points. Like, you're allowed to have one game when you're maybe not at the top of your game. And now, did it come at a really bad spot for Brian Hartline right after the news breaks that he's going on to a different school? Yes. And does that make it more realistic for Ryan Day to maybe not trust Brian Hartline as much? That's understandable. We know there's some extra stuff going on there. Quickly going over the qualifications of Ryan Day offensively, we can see that he grew up as a quarterbacks coach in the NFL, and he has had an offensive background over the course of his coaching career. You know, Boston College quarterbacks coach, Eagles quarterbacks coach, Niners quarterbacks coach, was the quarterbacks coach for us, for Ohio State, when he came over here in 2017 before, he had the play calling responsibilities before Chip Kelly. And the other thing that Greg McElroy was talking about was how before Chip Kelly took over as the offensive coordinator and play caller for Ohio State in 2024, we used to be extremely aggressive play calling, and then we kind of were more conservative with Chip Kelly, and then this season with Brian Hartline, and it led to a championship last year and a really, really good offense this year. So he's saying, that's not going to happen anymore. He expects Ryan Day to go back to being extremely aggressive, which makes sense for this team because we had to be conservative to start the year because Julian Sayin was a redshirt freshman who was starting in his first big game to start the year this season, starting in his first season as a college quarterback. So we couldn't just put an entire full game plan on his plate. We couldn't put the wins and losses of the team on a guy who's never been a starting quarterback before at the college football level. That just wouldn't be fair, and it wouldn't be smart to a player like that. But now it does make sense to go out and be more aggressive because we have Carnell Tate, who's going to be a top 5 NFL draft pick. We have Jeremiah Smith, who would have been the first overall pick should he have came out in the NFL draft last year after his true freshman season in college, which isn't allowed because most guys wouldn't be able to handle that. But Jeremiah Smith is just on another level. Julian Sayin was a Heisman finalist, one of the top 4 quarterbacks in all of college football, top 4 players in all of college football. He is now a player who can handle an aggressive game plan. He is able to handle having more of the offensive responsibilities placed on his shoulders. We need to do things like let him come to the line of scrimmage and call an audible if he can see that the defense is either off of Jeremiah Smith or if there's single coverage on Jeremiah Smith. He needs to be able to have the offensive freedom to make audibles at the line of scrimmage in ways that give us an extra opportunity when Jeremiah Smith is facing a look that is positive for our offense. The entire offense needs to be going through Jeremiah Smith. Forget about taking him off of the field when we get down into the red zone where we need to be having all of our best players on the field. I mean, I know our offensive line hasn't been the most dominant thing this season, so you want to go with more heavy personnel, meaning either an extra offensive lineman or more tight ends to give us a better push in the run game. But we really should still be leaning on what the strength of this team is. And even if we have 2 guys who might be the first non-quarterback off the board in the NFL draft, both on defense, in Arvell Reese and Caleb Downs, the strength of this team, where we need to lean on, is the wide receivers. There are our best players in Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith, and that's where the entire game plan has to be. So I'm not saying come out 5 wide, come out in 3 wide receiver sets every single time we're in the red zone, but at least one of those guys have to be on the field, and we cannot be taking those guys off the field to go to heavy personnel groupings when we get into the red zone. Ryan Day is going to be more aggressive, but I do think if he does decide to be more aggressive, it is exactly what this team needs, and it should hopefully lead to a win versus the University of Miami, although it should be a really, really great game. Super excited to watch this thing go down, but that's what I got for this video. If you stuck around the whole way through, I appreciate you taking the time to watch it all the way. Please hit that like button if you haven't already. Hit the subscribe button if you're new to the channel, and go Buckeyes.